So, what if a beauty company accidentally invented a lotion that could rewrite your DNA entirely into being someone else's DNA? Would that be like really, really bad or what? Because it would be extremely, extremely bad. And that's the premise for the book, Extreme Makeover Apocalypse Edition by Dan Wells. I was actually going to read this book, reread this book, and then also read Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang. I'm still planning on reading Natural Beauty. I don't know if I'll include it as part of this video. It depends on how long this part goes. But I started to sit down and reread Extreme Makeover. I read it a couple years ago and I loved it. And then I sat down and I just reread the whole thing in one sitting last night. I just had such a good time that it kind of screws up my normal formatting. But I want to make it a bit of a double feature. We'll see if it winds up being double. Because both of these books are about the beauty industry and body horror transformation. I know a lot less about Natural Beauty. As I understand, Natural Beauty is about a woman who gets involved with a skincare wellness company. She joins that company and works her way maybe up the ranks and gets more and more involved in what becomes more of a cultish and horrifying situation. That's what I know about that going in. Extreme Makeover, though, is about a beauty company that invents, like I said, it accidentally invents a lotion that is capable of rewriting your DNA, and it just follows the progression of that. I really like this book. I think it's just such a good time. I think it's a lot of fun. I would recommend it. I have a couple caveats I should get out of the way on that. I don't think the book is the most amazingly written. I don't think that the prose is necessarily anything that great. I don't think the characters are really that much of characters. I think there's some issues of pacing. I could name a lot of things that aren't that great about it, honestly. Definitely, in terms of triggering content, I don't think the book gets too deep on a lot of stuff, but it does cover pretty much every horrifying way that the technology involved, the skin lotion, could be used, which includes some real crimes and frightening situations, just even in a mentioning way. And there's some language in here that's a bit, I don't like some of the language in here. Not frequently used, but again, it comes up. So there's a list of some issues with this book, very broadly, but I still really like it. And what I like about it and why I do recommend it, especially I'll tell you a bit more about it and then I'll give I'll actually do a spoilers cutoff because I'm otherwise going to just talk you through this book, because even if you don't want to read it, I think that is just such a fun idea that I hope it's enjoyable to hear about. And that's exactly why I like it. I think the idea is great. And it's a book that is committed to taking this one idea, this one sci-fi what if, that it does go and spend quite a bit of the book, honestly, going into some of the science about how this could be sci-fi-ish plausible. It's impossible. But they do come up with ideas and try to work out what it's doing, how is this lotion doing this thing, that I think does add to it if you like speculative sci-fi, which this definitely is. But otherwise, it's just following a progression of if somebody came up with this thing, what would that do? And the answer in this book is, right from the start, the end of the world. We start in the book and just right at the top of each chapter, it says how many days until the end of the world. So chapter 1, 267 days until the end of the world. And that's before we really even see the lotion in action, understand what it is. So this is a book that is just about charting from start to finish. Skincare company scientist accidentally makes a lotion. The world as we understand it is in every way completely decimated. And I love that. I really enjoy that kind of thing. It makes me think of Black Mirror really comes to mind first, honestly. But I do like a lot of episodes of Black Mirror because I like seeing sci-fi ideas, or, other genres as well, but especially science fiction ideas, just extrapolated, explored. I like to just see, what the effects of this would be on the population. How would this be abused? How would it be used? What are the applications, good and bad, of this new technology or idea? And that is what Extreme Makeover is about. That's why, even though I don't think that it is like a great book in a lot of the ways I normally care about a book being great, I think it's really good at that one part of it, and that's the part that is the most interesting anyway. So I'm glad for that. Definitely rereading it. I read it a few years ago. I really liked it back then. It kind of was just in my mind as like I want to check that out again, and I had such a good time rereading it. I really did. Just as that, like, every so often, especially in the beginning, you just go, boy, that's bad. Wow, that's really bad, and that's gonna get worse and worse, and you just have this increasing sense of, boy, that's gonna go badly, to just everything that's going on, because all this is a series of things going pretty badly, in an interesting variety of ways. So, I will tell you a little bit more about the introduction of this book. I'm going to start, I guess, by telling you about, like, part one, which is the creation of this lotion and the discovery that it's doing stuff it's not meant to be doing. Because it starts out very ordinary. We're introduced to our main character, Lyle. Lyle is the chief scientist at New U, which is spelled Y-E-W, because they used to be a cancer research place that, cancer chemical place that used like a yew tree thing. And now they've had to rebrand into a cosmetics company. Lyle is a kind of dissatisfied scientist where he really wants to do bigger things. He wants to be on like the cover of Scientific American, but he's just been at this skincare company for a long time. He understands the science of it very well, but it's not really impressive. He wants to think of himself as a better person than he is. That is something that is a reoccurring and increasing theme in this book. Lyle is not a likable protagonist. He definitely, a lot of the time, seems very middle, just average man. Again, definitely a theme in this book, but he's also just really quite unpleasant, but unable to really recognize any of his flaws and issues. So he's not a great guy. None of the people in this book really are. Lyle, and then we are also introduced to like a slew of other boardroom characters. So like the CEO of the company, his Nepo son, the chief of finance, chief of marketing, their chief lawyer, like everybody's in a boardroom. And Lyle is announcing that he's kind of been working on a new skincare formula that is quite experimental. It's using this other stuff. He starts talking about how it's using like plasmids, which are part of DNA. And he goes into a bit of this thing. It's based on this treatment for burn victims that is kind of experimental that he's been refining. And basically this cream for burn victims would work by stimulating the growth of collagen in the skin. And the idea of this as a cosmetic is that collagen is what makes skin like seem young and healthy. So if you were able to stimulate the growth of collagen in just skin that isn't burned, it would also have that renewing effect. But pretty quickly the company, like the head lawyer, is looking at some of these papers and realizes that this is actually a gene therapy thing. The scientist responds, yeah, it involves plasmids, obviously it's like a gene therapy thing, but nobody else had realized that. But what they do immediately correct is that we can't sell this because the FDA would never allow it. Things with gene therapy are way more complicated. They're just not a thing for consumer cosmetics. But what it is really a good solution. Like, he has some examples from early testing he's been doing, and the company agrees that, like, the before and after pictures of somebody, the woman does look very noticeably better. It seems like this is a very effective treatment for wrinkles and aging and things like that. So they're very interested in this product, but there is just no legal way they would be able to sell it. Still, it's so exciting that they do start thinking about how could we get around this. they decide that they could sell it as an herbal supplement, not supplement, but an herbal-based cosmetic, because the FDA has basically no standards for that kind of thing as long as it meets a list of certain approved herbal substances that are considered to be totally safe, so there's no risk. They will put this on the market as an herbal supplement. They will not say that it involves any gene therapy, and instead just use like basic marketing code words like it helps with your production of collagen and it makes you, feel better and look healthier. But all of those terms that don't imply that it actually does anything. But then they're going to use like word of mouth and some things that way doesn't come from the company, but alleges some of the actual real effects of it as being more powerful. Now, Lyle doesn't like this at all, mainly because this is a really exciting thing that he's been working on in the science aspect of these plasmids that he's been working with. And he just really wants the credit. He doesn't like that they're going to go underhanded and like kind of sell it like this. They're like, don't worry, buddy, we'll still sell your version of it, which will be basically the same thing that we're going to be already selling, but we'll submit that one to FDA approval, and in like 10 years when it's like approved as like a burn treatment, we then can use that same thing and make it officially this special like gene therapy collagen renewal stuff. And he still isn't really happy about that. But again, there is this definite sense that what he's least happy about in this is not really the underhanded way the company does that. He disapproves, he shoots down a lot of their ideas on like, that won't work, that's not good. But he's really more concerned with the credit than he is with a lot of the ethics. Still, the company moves forward into further testing. Like, it's almost all the way through, but he has 1 or 2 batches left to keep going. So Lyle goes to run the test of batch 14G. And he does this with his assistant. His assistant is Susan. She's an intern. Lyle has this really awkward, uncomfortable thing for Susan that is not reciprocated, and she's not really even aware of, but he is just kind of a bit obsessively a bit in love with her in a bit of a creepy way. But nothing actually ever happens there, which is great. But yeah, so Lyle and Susan are running this new batch on some test subjects. It's a very standard thing. They've already gone through a bunch of testing at this point. I think the total is like 200 people. So they're not expecting anything to be different, but each time he is tweaking the formula a little bit. I don't know anything about cosmetics, but we'll walk through that. And everything seems totally normal. There is one moment where Susan spots one of the test participants is kind of attractive, and she's clearly into him and wants to flirt with him. So she takes some of the sample skin lotion and puts it on her, on him herself, which Lyle quickly corrects. We're not meant to touch any of the lotion. You have to only use a wooden spatula. But this is important, so I point it out. And everyone else puts on this lotion. They go away. Things are proceeding pretty much fine, except like 2 weeks later, one of the test participants dies. And he dies very suddenly from a flu kind of thing. Like, he seems to be dying of a flu that turned into a stroke. It's quite mysterious. It was quite sudden. It doesn't seem like it could be at all linked to the lotion, but because this is now in their test history, they do have a bit of a worry on that. They have to double check that they are totally in the legal clear, that this cannot be connected to them in any way. So the company is like, we need to investigate what went down with this guy and assure us that it's totally good. It's unlikely that this could be related, but let's be sure, okay? And at the same time, a couple other things start to be a bit weird going on with some of the other test subjects. Like, Lyle at the supermarket runs into somebody who looks quite a lot like him. And it's very strange, like really a lot like him, but it turns out this guy is actually one of the test subjects. He totally didn't recognize him because this man has lost like 200 pounds, like a huge amount of weight in the last 3 weeks or so, which Lyle immediately is like, that is not really possible. That is an insane amount of weight to lose. That is basically impossible to lose safely or really at all in that period of time. But the test subject is just like, yeah, I've been exercising and working it. I'm feeling great, you know, and he's just seems totally fine. He also, though, looks a lot like Lyle, but Lyle is like, well, you know, he was a lot more overweight before. It's entirely possible that when he lost that weight, a lot more of like his bone structure and stuff was clearer, and it turns out we look a lot alike, but, you know, that's not impossible. He also then starts getting calls and messages from some other test subjects. One man is very angry and is accusing the company and the lotion of bleaching his skin. And another man is suffering from like leg pains. Susan goes off on holiday, and when she comes back, she's had this horrible flu sickness and is just feeling quite bad. Her voice is very groggy and odd. So Lyle is kind of trying to get a hold of this situation where things are going weird for a lot of the test subjects, but there isn't a connective link, really. They were in the study, but they're not sharing symptoms. Like, there is some people are reporting things like flu-like symptoms or being very dehydrated, very hungry. That is kind of shared with some of the cases, but otherwise, they're all over the place. And that's very weird, because if something is wrong, you'd expect it to be consistent among people, or more consistent. And Lyle is really kind of struggling to put this together a bit late, I would say, especially, I guess, because I've told you what this cream does, so you're not going in blind. If you went in blind, I wonder if it would take a bit longer for you to clock on with it, but yeah. Lyle is trying to piece this together. As part of it, he goes to the autopsy, or talk to the doctor who's performed an autopsy on the patient who died. And this guy has a much more complicated case than a flu that turned into a stroke, which is already quite weird. Because actually looking at how he died from some organ failure, and even more so, something very weird with his blood, it seems. Additionally, when he was having an autopsy performed, they found that he had breast tissue that wasn't visibly developed, but he had like a layer of some breast tissue on his chest. He had an undeveloped uterus and ovaries, which, you know, that's like intersex, but that wasn't on his medical record before. It's entirely possible for somebody to never be discovered as intersex while also being intersex, so it's not out there, but it was very strange that this wasn't on his record. He also had a higher level of estrogen than, again, is typical. And additionally, his blood type is listed as A negative, and this is all a bit weird. So the Lyle goes and requests, like, hey, did this guy have previous blood tests and other stuff? And he hears later back from the doctor, who confirms, oh, he had a different blood type on his previous tests. So that's just impossible. Not only that, usually if you introduce the wrong blood type to a body, it's a more of a rapid reaction, where this man died slowly in the hospital from a very unexplained condition. It was like his body was slowly producing the wrong type of blood, which turns out to be what happened. What this man died of is that his body started to produce an incompatible blood type to his blood type, and his body basically went at war with itself and died. And all of this is something Lyle learns while he's being arrested because a man with his exact DNA and appearance just robbed a house in a place that he definitely was not at, but the police have such firm proof that they're sure it's him. Additionally, at the hospital when all this is going down, another man who looks exactly like Lyle shows up and is extremely angry with him because this man used to be a different test subject, and he was a like short Mexican man, and now he looks exactly like Lyle, who is like a white guy who very specifically has a heterochromia He has heterochromia of a specific kind that is like a small bit of discoloration in one eye rather than the full eye thing. I don't know much about heterochromia. I assume all of it is a DNA irregularity, but he specifically points out like his is, which makes it so much more improbable for this apparent doppelganger to look like almost exactly like him and also have this heterochromia. So this is where Lyle puts it together. He realizes that this lotion is somehow turning everybody into him. And the one exception is the test subject who died. The test subject who died was the man that Susan was flirting with, and that she put the lotion on herself. And that guy is turning into Susan, which this is fully capable of changing that over, but Susan had a different blood type, where Lyle has O negative. So he has a universal donor blood type, which means that all the other people transforming are able to turn safely into Lyle. Like, the extreme metabolism changes and shifting of body weight, bone structure, all of that is why there's these flu-like symptoms and hunger and thirst. But otherwise, it seems to be a safe transition that takes about 3 weeks to fully take effect. And then the people are DNA-wise completely identical to Lyle. And that's pretty crazy. At the same time, there is a rival cosmetics company that one of the people involved in the test was actually a spy for, that steals some of this lotion. And it's actually quite a funny scene because as they're all congratulating themselves and they're kind of like, they know that this is a new lotion, that this is a very like valuable brand and probably a great invention. Their plan is like, we're going to reverse engineer this, it'll be great. And they're kind of like passing around one of the sample tubs and like feeling it. And that's when Lyle calls the test subject and he's like, so, have you been having any odd side effects? Are you, like, it's not like the lotion probably caused anything. I'm just checking, like skin discoloration, fever or flu symptoms. And it's like while he's in this boardroom of the rival place and everyone is looking at it on their hands, realizing that this might have some sort of horrible side effect. And indeed, everybody at the rival cosmetics firm, at least in the upper one, turns into a copy of Lyle. So, at the end of part 1, I'm now tapping through my e-reader really quickly to see if I can get to part of this conversation so I can double check. So at the end of part 1, Susan has been hospitalized. She seems to have leprosy. That's the only thing that the doctors are able to determine. She is turning into Lyle because she used a different sample of the hand cream afterwards. And it's really, again, quite an intense transformation a lot of the time. Here, I found it. So she's hospitalized. Lyle is feeling very bad about that and guilty. And Lyle, though, has figured out what's going on, so he returns to the boardroom. He brings one of the test subjects who's turned into his identical clone, as it were, and is explaining to everybody, this is what the lotion is doing, which is really wild, but it's true. This also concerns one of the boardroom guys who has been using some of the lotion and also gave it to his wife, who currently is a bit ill and is a bit upset about the idea of like, we're both going to turn into you, Lyle. And as they're trying to figure it out, they have the realization that because of what Susan did to that one man who was turning into Susan, it's not like the DNA, like this lotion, is totally marked to only ever be Lyle. It seems that there is such a thing as like a blank version, and then some of it has become encoded to Lyle. The first person who touches or some DNA that comes in contact with the lotion encodes it with that DNA. From then on, anyone who touches the lotion has their DNA completely rewritten. So they still have blank ones, and they can imprint it on other people, meaning they realize that they can get old DNA from Susan and give that to her, and she will reverse this transformation and turn back into herself. And this is also possible to do with the board member and his wife. And as they're kind of discussing, like, trying to reverse it and what they're going to do with all of the extra Lyles, the CEO's son at one point makes a joke where he just, like, laughs, and it's like, oh yeah, you want to turn your wife back? He's like, I'm just wondering if she's even hot. And then continues like, well, you know, if you can turn your wife into anybody, why wouldn't you want her to be hotter? And this starts this whole discussion where everyone in the boardroom is kind of going, this is actually the best cosmetic item that could be invented. Because for so many reasons, people want to look different. Our entire company and the whole industry is based on getting people to look different. Well, you can literally look completely different, and you can have yourself be exactly what you want to be. You want to be like the model on the box. You literally can become the model on the box. And Lyle is really horrified by this, especially because they haven't got this outbreak under control yet at all. And the idea of continuing instead of destroying, I mean, already you can see a lot of catastrophic stuff that is potentially there. And this is something that Lyle is aware of and points out. He kind of tries to shut down a lot of these stuff, like it's illegal, it's a bad idea. Everybody else, though, is coming up with different ideas, solutions, and Lyle isn't actually trying that hard. He's like, it's really easy to misuse, you know, it could be dangerous. And the company's just like, well, we could go offshore to do a lot of the production, then import it in. We potentially could sell it on, like, the black market even. Like, they're just so down on this. And he just doesn't really stop. He's mostly thinking, like, oh, I want to save Susan, so I'll go ahead and go through with this. And that really isn't a fair enough justification for what is going through, but that is kind of the sense of Lyle as a character as a whole. He is not going to stop anything. He's going to feel kind of guilty about it, and then whenever he does take an action, it's always like the wrong action. So the company decides that they are going to go through with this. They call the new lotion Rebirth. They're really excited to just rush this launch out as soon as possible and figure out, like, there's a lot of talk, and this is the stuff that I really enjoy, is a lot of talk about how they're going to market it, how they're going to retail it. Things like the, at one point a little bit later, when the product launches, there's multiple chapters that are just like the product launch show and like the cheesy dialogue of how they would introduce this product to the world. I really love all of that stuff. I love all of the concerns that are being raised and the different ideas. They decide that they're going to build clinics in different cities. People are going to go into the clinic specifically to keep it more under controlled. But as you think, like, all of that still is so risky. So Lyle, getting frustrated with how this is proceeding, decides that, well, this also has incredible medical potential. This thing is more than just cosmetics, and the company is also like, yeah, I mean, it is also, but cosmetics are like the real money, and we can do both. Lyle decides to take some of the blank lotion and find a charity that is willing to accept it, that will use it for medical reasons. Because when you apply this, you can apply it with your own DNA. You effectively become a clone of yourself, but you become a clone of yourself as the body believes your body ought to have been. Like all of the initial DNA. So basically that means it can cure wounds, it can cure amputations, it causes the body to regrow to its full natural state. Which, you know, could do a lot of things for a lot of people depending on procedures done to them. But it also, again, it could save lives, and somebody who is very sick could rewrite their DNA to just become a healthy person. There's so many potential uses for this that he decides he's going to find somebody who's willing to do that. And he looks around, but he just goes and, like, calls a bunch of places and says, "It had been surprisingly difficult to find a charity willing to accept an unidentified medical substance, especially since Lyle had refused to give his name to any of them or explain where the substance had come from or what it did." So with those parameters, he winds up at a small charity that is run by a doctor who is now more of a new age healer, named Kuvam. And Kuvam is, he recognizes the uses of it, which Lyle likes. Like, he recognizes that the medical uses of this are very powerful. He also recognizes something Lyle hadn't seen, which is that it would make somebody immortal, because what this is doing is recreating the body in full every time you're using it, meaning it will recreate the body at that age. So somebody could just keep having this done, and the age is something that is, like, heavily biological. There's a lot in our genes that are telling things to age and things, but with a total rewriting of it, this is basically immortality, which Lyle hadn't really thought about, and could be immediately concerning. But he gives the substance over to Kuvam, who pretty much immediately uses it to save somebody's life in the hospital, but also at the same time is immediately positioning himself as somebody who's able to grant immortality, and combining it with a lot of those new age philosophy ideas about life and death and the universe and energy. And yeah, it clearly turns almost immediately into a cult-like situation. I mean, he brings a woman who's dying of cancer back to full health. I mean, she becomes a clone of her daughter, basically. So she loses a bunch of age, and she even undoes her double mastectomy. Like, it's clearly a miracle thing. So it's not really a surprise that there's a cult going on. But it's just one of those many unintended side effects. And this sort of is where the first part ends, which is just, okay, we have a substance that is extremely powerful, but also no one really knows how it works. Lyle says it should be impossible that it's doing what it does, but it clearly is. So it works. But he doesn't know how it works, which means he doesn't know the extent of how it works. He only just learned and realized that, yeah, this could cause immortality. So the ramifications for the human race are already really concerning, but not being considered. And then we have the skincare company that is just extremely excited about how much profit there is to be made in this. How this will revolutionize things, but mostly in a way that they're thinking about the industry, not about the human race and society. But it clearly will, because once you start thinking like, okay, DNA, totally rewrite someone's DNA, this is gonna mess up a lot of our society in a lot of ways. So that's like where part 1 actually ends. I'm then going to keep talking more. Part 2 and part 3, I think, blend together even more so, but I just wanted to go into like, that's the first part of the book. That's the first like 100 pages. The book, well, on my e-reader, that's the first 100 pages, and then on my e-reader, there are a total of 382 pages. So percentage-wise, you can see that's like a fourth of the book, so there's a lot more that happens after this point. But if that just sounds like a really interesting sci-fi situation, I think that this is just a fun book to read in that way. Okay, so what happens is just a series of escalating events. You really are watching this car crash and going, well, that's not fucking good. So, let's see. Double checking my things here. They are discussing a lot of like how they're going to market this. They're wanting to rush forward when this is like, this product is going to be released. At the same time, Lyle gets kidnapped by the rival skincare company, all of the people at that rival company are now Lyle, so they replace him with their chief scientist and kidnap Lyle. Their chief scientist is honestly better at being Lyle than Lyle is, and the number of Lyles in the world is going to keep going up in this book, which is where you get the only real, like, character aspect, which is Lyle's not really a great guy, but he's also kind of a nothing of a guy. He realizes he hasn't really been having much passion or life purpose or big anything. He really doesn't have much of a life. And now he's being increasingly confronted with people who are in every way genetically identical to him. And that kind of confrontation of identity and of self, and just like, he doesn't really know who he is. And now a bunch of other people are him, and they're better at being him or worse than being him, or they don't really know who he is either. They're just him. So there's some of that. I think that the book does okay, but mostly in that, like, speculative sense of, like, man, that'd be really weird, right? More than I think that Lyle's character is, like, fully explored in the way that I'd like it to be explored. Mostly I think just the idea of it is interesting. So Lyle is taken by the rival lab, and they want him to recreate the lotion. And he doesn't know how to. He tries to, and he just can't do it. Like, the spy and all these things, they stole his lab notes, they've been recreating it step by step exactly as he did it, and they're not able to make the same lotion that has the effect. It just turns into a good lotion. It doesn't turn into a DNA rewriting one. Lyle tries it, and he can't achieve it either, which is another thing in his identity crisis, because this is like the biggest invention in all of mankind, and he's the creator, and he doesn't understand how it works at all, and he doesn't understand how it happened. He can't remake it. And they try a series of increasing tests of, like, getting contaminants from his lab in case it was, like, something he touched that got in there and messed with it. Nothing at all. As he's being just held hostage here, and the other Lyle is taking over and getting ready for the big product launch. At the same time, Susan, after having been cured of the, been turned back into herself, wakes up being held hostage in a house somewhere, and she's held hostage with a bunch of other people. And these people have been turned into copies of the various board members. So there's, like, 2 chief of finances, there's, like, 2 of the lawyers. All of the people who are guarding the place are copies of this same really, like, burly man named Larry. It turns out that all of those people who have been transformed, except for herself, were the ones from the original test study. They were all Lyles. Now they've been turned into body doubles, because the skincare company is aware that this is a really crazy product they're pushing, and want the doubles to be used for, you know, like, doubling purposes, like, to be disposed of or, you know, set up to be killed, that kind of thing. Otherwise, though, they're mainly being held hostage just to control the situation as much as possible. So Susan just winds up there. She eventually escapes there, and runs to try to make it to the product launch, because she wants to go and expose the company for their really unethical experiments and how bad this product probably is going to be. So we just kind of followed that for a while. The release up to, I think I would just go to the release next. I'm trying to look here to see if I can find anything specific, but I read this last night and I wasn't keeping super close notes on a lot of this because I was just enjoying it. Yeah, so they get to the release. I really like this release sequence because they have a lot of this where they play it up so much, but it is exactly how this kind of thing would go down. A bunch of women in America being like, I just try so hard to look nice and do these things, but it's so difficult. And like cutting between that, and then the company's like, but what if there was a way to do that? And then each one of those women from the, I'm just a normal person, comes out and has been transformed into this like model. So there are like, I want to say like 10 identical copies of this one model who walk out on stage as part of the reveal, looking absolutely beautiful, but also, the same. And there's a lot of, they also try to spin some of the humanitarian things, but mostly they are focusing on like, be who you want to be. We've sourced all of these models, we've gathered them. You could get a build that's specifically for sport, or, they're selling like fantasy kits, which is like, you could transform yourself for a holiday away, and then when you get home, you use some lotion that's been coded to your original DNA, and you turn back into yourself. So you get to have that escapism fantasy, but you come back and, you can just blend back into ordinary life. All of these things. There are protests outside because some of the rumors coming forward are that they're cloning and replacing people, because the cancer woman who turned into a copy of her daughter, that's quite weird. To try and join in on some of the good publicity, the skincare company found some twins where newborn twins, where one of them was not fully developed. So they turned that twin into a clone of its twin, but, regrows fully into a viable infant. And the church is very upset about all of these things. Kuvam is coming out still and being like, not saying outright that he's using rebirth yet, but is getting a lot of attention for his preachings and miracle healing abilities. Susan rushes outside to try and tell people about how bad all of this is going to go, but it really is too late. The product is so immediately exciting and revolutionary and wild that it's immediately super popular. There's basically a riot outside as they give away a free bottle to somebody in the crowd, and all of these protests building up. At the same time, Lyle escapes from his captivity and he takes a bunch of the actual serum, and he's running through the streets just kind of with it in his arms and running about, not really knowing where he's going or what he's doing. And somebody spots him and recognizes the branding on these blank lotions and tries to grab it from him. Then the crowd descends into chaos, and then one bottle drops out of his hand, rolls across the road, and a truck hits it, and it explodes everywhere, and then people are freaking out for another reason, because they don't really know necessarily how it works, if this is blank or not. But even if it's blank, if you get it on your skin, it encodes to you. But then if anybody else makes contact, which, again, if you're in a crowd jostling, who knows what happens when two imprinted ones collide and you're in a crowd fighting about it. So absolute chaos immediately is going on. And almost immediately as well, bad things start to happen, because people don't really know what this cream is. People have seen that it works, but also are struggling to believe that it works because it's so crazy. But right away, there are crimes being perpetrated based on this. So, there is the case being discussed of a man who, there's a man who got a cloning lotion. He was the manager of a clinic, so right away before it's even open to anybody. And he received a shipment. He took some of the lotion of one of the supermodels and put it on his wife while she was asleep without her consent. I didn't even know if she was asleep, but put it on his wife. And that caused a domestic dispute. And then there's this sort of an interview with a lawyer and a police officer. It's a news interview written script style where they're like, this seems like it's a crime, but we're not sure how to categorize it. And a lot of it depends on if it does transform her DNA. But even then, we don't really know what it's called. But yeah, of course that's going to be a thing, which is really crazy. Like, again, there is still a possibility of turning yourself back if you use something like, if you had access to blank lotion, which no one is meant to have access to the blank lotion, that's supposed to be tightly controlled by the company, and if you had DNA from yourself, which might not even be quite correct DNA. You'd hope it would be, but you need that guarantee. Like, when Susan turns back into herself, it turns out that she turns into a version of herself that is several years younger, like 3 years younger. She's 19, because they found some, like, skin deposits, basically, in her house, but it turned out that they were old skin deposits, like several years old, and that just wound up being the DNA that took. So that's already, again, horrific. Duvon dies. Kuvan is killed during an interview, but speaks about how he will come back and be resurrected. And soon enough, he does come back and is like, it's me, it's actually me. And we're never really sure from that point, whenever we see Kuvan, if it is the same man in any way. Did the guy who got killed on that news interview, was that the original, or was that one of his followers that was him? As part of the philosophy, there is no difference between any of them and any one. It's not like everyone that he meets is turning into him, but he definitely has made several people already him. So there are several different people who are playing his part, and we lose track entirely which one that is. But it sure builds the cult aspect. And then there's an instance pretty quickly where a celebrity at like the opening for one of these clinics, a like minor celebrity is spotted and attacked as people try to grab some of her hair to use for the lotion. It's really quickly getting out of hand. It's doing extremely well and making a lot of money, but the company is also aware that it is very quickly going to be probably banned or shut down by the FDA. They're hoping to get around that, but especially with this increase of incidences, it's getting more and more likely because it's just causing so much chaos. So, and they didn't have approval to release it. That's the other thing. Like, they decided to just release this and then deal with it because it was so big that it couldn't really be properly suppressed by the government. And also they had plans for when it was running into issues, they were prepared to just go on the black market. So they did not have FDA approval when they rolled this out as an openly a cloning miracle thing, but they decided to. The fake Lyle is killed by the company, but that means the real Lyle is alive. And the real Lyle, now kind of a fugitive from the company, from the rival company, he runs into Susan, who has since teamed up with one of the original test subjects, whose name is Tony. Yep. And one of the bodyguards from that place, Larry. So Susan, Tony, and Larry kind of become vigilantes against the injustice of rebirth, but they don't really know what they're doing either. This is an increasing thing, is that just nobody knows what they're doing because this thing is such a crazy technology that there's just no sense of how can you stop it? What can you do about it? They have no idea. Lyle wants, they want to like join up with Lyle, but he winds up running away. Something Lyle realizes, though, around this time is that he had some scars from when he had his appendix and gallbladder removed, and they're gone. So he realizes that he has been infected with the lotion, but it was a lotion that was encoded to him. So he's a clone of himself. But also, the removal of those scars and what this thing works off of on the DNA level means that it has rebuilt him. It's given him his appendix and such back. But not only that, he's realized that the rebirth is rebuilding the people it's infected not once, but constantly. That everybody who has been infected by it is not just like it's a one-over transformation. The DNA is permanently altered to constantly be rebuilding itself as that DNA blueprint. So it's not just immortality in that you could apply it and then like reset years. You will not age once you've been infected with this. You will not age, you will heal from any disease or illness much quicker. It is very violent about rewriting your DNA extremely quickly. And that is also really concerning because you will not have any ability to permanently change your body from the DNA blueprint. And again, like no aging, no dying, no many diseases. It's all getting a little bit worrying. But Lyle runs away from teaming up, and pretty soon, it's 155 days until the end of the world, that the government bans the substance. And calling it The Substance, there's a film called The Substance. I'd really recommend it. I love body horror. That film's great. And talking about, I can think of a number of like films and books that are about goop that does things to your body, and I love them all. I think it's like my favorite genre. So, okay. The government bans it, and we get to hear a couple more crimes that have been committed using this. So, there is a rapist who found that his doorknob had been smeared with the lotion. One of his victims confessed that she put it with an attractive women thing, hoping that the rapist would be raped, and thus experienced that same hell. Then another thing is that a teenager did a school shooting, but with this lotion, turning everybody in the school who was affected by the lotion into copies of himself. Again, they're not really supposed to have access to the blank lotion. That is one thing that I'm actually a bit confused on in terms of this book, is that where did they all get it? But the thing is, this company was not careful at all. And so it also doesn't surprise me that a lot of people have found the ability to get access to the blank lotion. And then there's been a hate crime there's been a lot of hate crimes using the lotion. So there's a description that the Ku Klux Klan have been using it to turn people white, and that this has been occurring in a lot of different areas like that, which are, these three are some of like the most, well, the two of them particularly, like horrible examples we get of how this would be abused. But I think that is such a component of speculative sci-fi that I really want to see and think about, because yeah, these things would be used for crime, and they would be used for really like repugnant, horrible crime. And I think that seeing that considered, thought about, explored in any way, I'm just like, yeah, I want to think about how this thing could be used in every possible way, because it obviously can also be used for lots of good stuff. This book is more concerned with unintentional side effects and the extremes on either side, but you really get the feeling that the author, and I think he says this in the afterword even, like just kind of sat down and chatted for a while, like if this existed, how would people use and abuse it? And I would love any suggestions of other like movies, TV shows, books that explore like that same vein of just, if this thing existed or it worked like this, how would that impact people in the many, many ways that anything can impact people. So it's, they shut down the production of it and the sale of it, but Rebirth immediately hits the black market. Also, one of the fake Lyles is now the, I think he's the Homeland Security Director. No, he's a senator special liaison to the Department of Homeland Security. So also, they've already been infiltrated, because that's another use for this, is that government infiltration is a huge risk. Replacing people. So, okay. So in response to this and the fact that there still is a lot of black market, the government begins to seize all of the known lotion that it can. And Susan is very angry about this, as are her compatriots. They're concerned about how the government will want to study, use, and abuse this, which totally makes sense and they would do. There is already a consideration of how this could be used as a biological weapon, and we'll get there. So Susan and her gang are like, the government's trying to seize some of this, let's just blow it up before they can get to it. They go to a factory where the government is seizing stuff and attempt to blow it up, but run into a lot of issues doing so. They eventually are able to kill some of the soldiers, cause some of an explosion, but the lotion that they're seizing, the government's seizing here, is all of that first contaminated Lyle batch. And that's considered kind of useless. Like, it's like, well, the government probably isn't going to use that anyway, but we have it here. The explosion didn't work properly, so they didn't explode all of the vats or anything. So they just have a bunch of Lyle lotion. And they start to consider, okay, how about we try to sabotage the black market and get people to not want to use Rebirth and flood the market with Lyle. So if we just flood the market with all of this, like, Lyle stuff, everybody's going to be wanting to buy it to look like celebrities and models. But what if there's so much bad Lyle out there that it drives people away from wanting to use it? So that's what they decide to do. And they start to distribute in the black market lots and lots of Lyle. And that means that there is an increasing number of Lyle. Lyle, meanwhile, is wanting to try and find where the blanks are coming from. He doesn't really know what he's doing. He feels a lot of guilt for what has happened, but he also doesn't really feel like he's fully to blame for it. He wants to do something. He's aware of all of the problems, but it's hit this stage that already is like, we have, almost from the beginning, we were at the point of no return, and we're deep in it at this point. So Lyle's wandering around like the streets trying to talk to people who are black market dealers who he recognizes have used it to look like a model, and trying to find where they obtained it. To get to some access of both, like, where is the blank stuff coming from, and, you know, that's mostly what he's interested in. He doesn't really have much of a plan. And he is learning that there are an increasing number of people who are turning into him, which is kind of a blessing and a curse. It means that he is no longer himself. Like, the company would like to almost certainly kill him. They killed a fake Lyle earlier. If they knew the real Lyle was out there, they'd want him dead because he could speak on a lot of their crimes and knows a lot of inside information. He's just a liability. They have no use for him anymore anyway. But now a bunch of people are randomly turning into him, and that means that he just is mistaken for somebody who bought a bad batch of this stuff and is now Lyle, instead of the fact that he's Lyle. And it's just, let's see. Yeah, Lyle. I'm looking at Lyle and thinking about what else is there as things are going up. Let's see. Right, so Lyle, in terms of tracing where this is coming from, finds that there is a, like, suspicious situation with, like, a man exchanging briefcases in Central Park. That seems to be one of, like, the main sources and dealers. And he recognizes that the man who is supplying this stuff and receiving the money is kind of a bit odd looking. He is racially ambiguous in a way that is genetically, if not impossible, extremely unlikely. He has just a very, like, mishmash of various features that seem odd. And what Lyle recognizes is that this is one of the board members. He was the first man who was infected by the Lyle stuff, and his wife was also infected, that guy. And so he's gone, and we hear about how he, after that point, just kept changing it up really quickly. He would just frequently be changing his appearance between different models. And at this point, it seems like he's used enough, so much of it that he has not really properly transformed into one, and he's now kind of a mishmash of these different models, which again has some very concerning implications. It's like, is it from overuse, or is it that he wasn't waiting long enough for his DNA to totally overwrite itself? Either way, that seems very easy to do by accident. So he goes and he talks to this old, his old coworker guy, and yeah, they totally want him dead, but he does learn that they have a very lucrative time doing black market stuff. They're totally happy and fine with all of this. Lyle has to escape. He does manage to, like, get a bunch of money before he goes, but he just escapes. And he's no closer or farther from, like, doing anything. At some point, he does a little bit of, like, he obtains a little bit of the stuff and is able to do some black market charity where, like, he's able to meet somebody with cancer and, like, provide them with some, and that kind of, like, makes him feel a bit better. But he's really not having any big impact. He's just running about. So we have a number of different perspectives in this. I think that maybe has been implied by me talking about it. We go to the military section where so this is the military section is the guy who was once a Lyle, previously a cosmetic rival. He's now this senator guy, and he's in this meeting where the US government wants to seize control of the cosmetic company's production plant and headquarters. They had built themselves this in anticipation of all the legal trouble. So they built it on Sao Tome, and this is a very small island off the coast of Africa, West Africa. So they built their headquarters and, like, a production plant there. And the US government wants to go there and seize it. And they're discussing how to do this when I'm not giving the names or whatever. His name is Ira, and whenever people are assuming someone else's identity, the book calls them Ira slash, so he's called Ira slash Moore, and elsewhere there's, like, Tony, where Tony slash Cynthia, Tony slash, I think he's Fabio at one point, like, all of that goes on. But anyway, I'll just call him the senator. So the senator is saying, well, what we can do is poison their water supply. Very specifically, the company has been already building itself an army. This is an important detail before we even get to the poisoning things. This is another, like, fucked up thing, but okay. The company has been hiring child soldiers and then dosing them with the DNA of, like, a big grown man. So that's so fucked up already. And they have an army of, like, 500 copies of this man. And the US government is like, okay, we want to get in here. What are we going to do about this and this situation? And the senator is like, okay, let's get some of our own stuff and dump it into the water supply of the island. And, like, the general's like, oh, what about the civilians? And he's like, well, it's fine. It's not the best human rights situation in the world, but we are talking about invading a neutral foreign power. We're not the good guys here. And specifically, the senator is proposing transforming everybody in the island into a cheerleader from the model list, because this cheerleader is like a small build, she's a cheerleader build. And so that would be a lot easier to take down. But the government's also then replies, well, they are using guns. So even if that might be a bit of a disadvantage, that's really not going to change a lot of things. And the senator was actually anticipating this would be shot down, because he knew that he'd introduce the softer one first and let that get shot down, but, like, first to introduce the idea before going to the more extreme option. And the more extreme option is to dilute the water for everyone in the island. They kind of say, well, we could just turn people back afterwards. And dilute the water to turn them all into a 6-year-old blind child who is suffering from late-stage leukemia. And leukemia is a disease of the chromosomes, so it would, of course, spread to everybody. Part of the transformation in the early stages is that huge amount of, like, sweating and heat and thirst and hunger because you're getting huge metabolistic changes. And that would be extreme when changing into a frail child. It seems like, it seems very immediate to me that this would kill everybody, and that is basically what happens. But the government's kind of like, well, this seems bad, but, you know, it's a war and we're invading anyway, and it's fine. So they do go ahead with it. And now my neighbors have started to play music outside, which I think is going to be picked up by this recording, meaning I'm going to stop filming here. Hi. Hello. Okay, great. I'm back. It's been actually like a couple of days, so I remember where I left off, but it's been a couple of days. Right. Where we left off, yeah, there was the American military was planning to just invade and do some horrible new versions of war crimes against a small island, Sao Tome. And things are clearly really, really bad. Let's see, I also want to say that just thinking about it over the last, like, bit, some stuff about this book, before I just continue with the plot while I'm here, just scattered bits. I was thinking, like, I do really like that the book is taking, like, the idea, I talked about this, I'm sure, so much, taking this base idea and just thinking about what are the ramifications and what are some of the worst case scenarios. In some ways, I wish that the book had expanded on a lot of those worst case scenarios. In other ways, though, I also think that it's good that it doesn't. I'm sort of a mixed bag on this. What we're about to see happening in Sao Tome is one of like the worst, like, direct crime that we're gonna see, and we're gonna see the ramifications a lot more close up than a lot of those, like, when they mention banning it, they go through a couple of those incidences. And I do think that there is something to be said of, like, I want to hear about all of these horrible things, because I think that that is the whole thing about this, is the idea of just, like, we have this technology, it's super wild what it can do, and it can be used for some really good things, some really bad things, and it can be used in just, like with any new technology or any change broadly, people will do everything on a wide spectrum of, you know, morals and helpfulness and just all of that. Considering that, like, as we're gonna get into, like, the later half of the book, I do think that the book really does slow down in its last act, and could have thus used a lot more of, like, fleshing out those aspects, especially so it becomes more than just, like, a one-off and exploring some of those ideas. I also, though, think that the author just is not as good with characters as he is with ideas, and along with characters, like, these people are all bad people, so it makes it easy to just go, well, they're bad people. But when it comes to showing, like, depth and nuance, I'm not sure that this author is quite the guy for it. So again, I'm like, maybe it is good that he didn't go deep on it. One aspect, though, that really struck me is that I've kind of mentioned this, but not really directly. The book doesn't talk about trans people. It does get mentioned a couple times, like when the realization that this is able to, by rewriting your DNA, it also is able to change one's biological sex. And that is, again, this whole field that I could imagine being really, really interesting of exploring about ideas. Like, I've also said that one thing that we've learned about this lotion is that it's constantly resetting your body to, like, a neutral state 1, meaning that you're unable to keep things like surgeries or changes to your body. So I think there's something really, like, interesting there that could be explored around both people who are trans who would be just very glad to use this lotion and just have a different body. You know, it's a very easy, simple way to do it. but also that comes with still, I mean, on the social thing, there's a lot of social stuff we don't see around the perception of people who use this lotion. Like, it all goes so badly so quickly that we don't really get to see what the culture is like about people who use this lotion and how they are treated by others, and how that would quickly, like, change from that initial, like, everybody at first, it's maybe a bit exciting, but maybe is it weird, or they shamed, or they... And with that trans angle, again, like, how that both seems like a miracle solution, but almost certainly wouldn't prove to be for a lot of people. There's also things like people having the difficulty of, you know, there's this one thing you can do, but also a lot of trans people are very happy with and wouldn't take like a miracle solution like that. They prefer their own bodies, because that is a big part of like that trans identity as well, is that it's your body, it's yourself. And as much as this miracle lotion that seems like it just automatically fixes the problem, please note I'm doing like little quotes on that kind of thing, would actually introduce a lot of really interesting things around just identity, self, body, anybody who has anything where you don't want to change your body, but people around you might assume that you're obviously going to be one of the first people who wants to do this. And that is something that the book kind of talks about later with one character who has a disability, but I don't like what they do there, and we'll talk about it when we get there. Anyway, those are some of my really scattered passing thoughts. So they, US military, doing a horrible, horrible thing. There's this thing where they're going to poison the water supply, right? They're like, we're going to poison the water supply with the DNA of this dying 6-year-old boy. That'll make it so that the US military can just march in to the cosmetic company's headquarters and factory and just take everything there. And after the point that they've invaded, they can just turn people back. And I pointed out that they'll almost certainly kill people because of the rapid metabolic changes and also just, you know, the condition of the person they're turning into. But among all of this, just another detail, as this book is always doing, of something that's like, oh, that's really bad, and we're not going to, So, here's the line where they're discussing the poisoning of the water supply. How do you intend to weaponize it? Asked the general. By dumping it in the water supply, said Iris/Moore. Testing shows no loss in effectiveness even when the lotion is severely diluted. Ooh, I see why that's really useful in your military strategy meeting, but, is that not a incredible the biggest red flag of concern that we all need to now pause and say, wait, this doesn't get weaker when severely diluted in water supply. This is something that people are using and will get into the water supply very easily, because you might put some on your skin and it gets absorbed, but like any lotion, you might also wash and some might come off. Some from the bottles. If the bottles are being cleaned 100% out when you throw away an empty bottle, that's all going in the water supply, isn't it? But no, they don't think about that. They're just thinking about how they want to seize this supply, one, so that the company doesn't have it anymore, but honestly, mostly because they want to make sure no one else has it. And that this is the ultimate biological weapon, and they, of course, want to seize it before any other nation seizes it. They want to use it and weaponize it, and especially prevent it from being weaponized against them. So they do this, and they indeed poison the water supply. We get a perspective from somebody who is on the island. It's the CEO of the skincare company, who finds himself rapidly degenerating as he crawls through a hallway, slowly dying, and starts to come across corpses of other people in similar states, all piled up by the elevator. And it's this absolutely horrific scene where he dies like everybody dies, and the US military, we learn, quickly went in there and they discovered that there was no lotion. They had normal production of lotions, but they had none of the rebirth formula. at all. So that was all for nothing. That was absolutely, like, they talk a little bit about some of the perspectives of people afterwards in terms of coming to this island where, like, every single person is dead, and not only dead, but died in an agonizing, horrible way. And then they're like, well, that was for absolutely nothing. Because, like way earlier, they don't know how to make new lotion. Lyle doesn't know how to make new lotion. Nobody does. So the company was still trying to recreate the formula and find their way to make more of the DNA cloning version, and they haven't been able to do it. Just absolutely no one has. So at this point, let's see. Yes. So at this point, there's been a lot of the Susan and her cohorts have been distributing this really, like, cheap Lyle formula to try and drive the black market out of being a black market. But they've realized that all they're doing is just making the black market more lucrative, because people are now willing to pay way, way more for real formula. And the Lyles are, like, people who get the Lyle formula are suffering, but also that isn't really a deterrent to the business that much, really. In fact, people who turn to Lyle are probably way more likely to want to find a way to get a lotion of a real, like, celebrities are apparently very, like, low worth these days. People want to just look like somebody who isn't Lyle, but ideally they can blend in. Because there are so many Lyles. There are thousands of them, and when Susan and her group realize this is not working, they get really frustrated, and Susan decides that this isn't the way forward, they have to figure something else out, and they just dump their whole supply of Lyle lotion. Just, like, I think they just dump it in, like, the bathtub and they wash it down. And what do we just hear about the water supply? So New York City becomes a hotbed for Lyles, as tons of people are turning into Lyle who did not buy the lotion at all. It is firmly in the water. People are slowly catching on to that, but it hasn't really been recognized yet that this is an issue. But Lyle, still trying to figure out what he's doing, he goes to a meeting of the Couvons, which are, the Couvent, like, cult group thing has really become especially a Lyle group. A lot of Lyles, you're discriminated against for being Lyle, because it's proof that you've done a crime, first of all, because you're not meant to be buying this stuff anyway, but also you then are bearing, like, the face of a criminal, well, the DNA of a criminal and a really hated man, because Lyle is the guy who invented all of this stuff in the first place. And so Lyles are very often losing their jobs, not able to get work. They are losing, you know, their families or homes or other situations. Like, the Lyles are losing their identities, both physically and also their connections to who they were in general. So there's just all of these displaced Lyles, and they are kind of joining together, especially with the Couvent group, which is doing a lot of that, like, we're all the same, we are just an expression of the universe, you know, there's a lot of meaning to all of this, and so they're all joining up with that. And the real Lyle winds up going to one of these ones, and it's at one of these meetings that a lawyer from the ACLU comes and talks about how there's now, like, a lot of Lyles. In fact, pretty soon, Lyles are going to become a proper, like, minority group in terms of numbers, that they're working to legislate Lyle as a minority group. So Lyle does become a racial minority, basically, is how they do describe it, because there are so many Lyles, and there are increasingly more and more Lyles. Like, pretty soon after that dumping, we're getting thousands, 10,000s of Lyles. It becomes increasingly more of an issue where, let's see, I'm looking here. Yeah, there are so many Lyles that it's a just, this is honestly, like, the lotion is a destabilizing force and the lotion made the Lyles, but the amount of Lyles is one of the biggest things causing the downfall of America right now. We're at like 77 days until the end of the world officially, and the amount of Lyles and people who are just have nothing else going on is starting to just flood the US all over the place. New York is a hotbed. They start to realize the water's infected, but people who are nowhere near that water are still getting infected by Lyle. And so the US starts to look at solutions for what to do with Lyles. And they decide that they need to start rounding up all the Lyles. So they start making camps for Lyle. These camps are, they're specifically like identification camps where they're planning on identifying all the Lyles by like their former identity, giving them a number thing, finding out who they are, and then helping them like connect back to their original identity. Because right now there's just all these people and it's very difficult to tell them apart. I don't know why I even just said that. Yes, they're identical. They're all Lyle. So this is like, you know, in theory, that's the idea, but it is kind of a bureaucratic hellscape because there are millions of Lyles and growing. So they're just rounding them up by the truckload. They're delivering them to these camps. At the camps, you're given a number and you're told to wait for when they'll basically have an interview to try and then sort out who you are, and then eventually you'd be released. But there are just so many Lyles that is absolutely going to be impossible, especially if the amount that just keep showing up. They are trying to do this, but it's like so many things in this book, it's just immediately clear that this is not going to be enough for how big the problem is. And Lyle, the real Lyle, is deciding to avoid going to these. He just doesn't trust it. He doesn't see anything good about it. He also suspects, and this is true, that the US wants to identify all the Lyles because it wants to find the real Lyle, because the real Lyle's the inventor, and maybe he would thus have a solution for this problem, and he doesn't. So he's trying to disguise himself and go under the radar as he's witnessing all of these other Lyles being rounded up. One day, though, he does see a really odd thing, which is that he sees a Lyle who has Down syndrome, and that's entirely new. That has not been witnessed by him after, you know, all of this time. He's never heard of that happening. And he finds that really quite odd for, I mean, a lot of reasons that kind of shouldn't be possible. It's also quite odd because he's seeing a version of his face, but he's also seeing it with somebody with Down syndrome. So he talks to the person, and he learns that this person didn't used to have Down syndrome. They got it when they took the lotion, like 5 weeks ago, which is, again, extremely weird because Down syndrome is a genetic condition. Like, that's something that happens at birth. It's not something that is possible to gain at all. But this is something that helps Lyle start to put together what went wrong with the lotion. Because Down syndrome is like chromosome based and it's related to the DNA. The lotion is doing stuff with DNA. And he also learns that the person who got this and wound up with Down syndrome had been an actor who kept like changing his DNA for different roles. And he might have done it a bit quicker than the wait period. This isn't something that's confirmed, but it also raises the question to Lyle of, it might be that this is something to do with having the lotion applied to you multiple times without letting it resolve itself fully. And like in the next coming days, there are way more cases of Lyles who have Down syndrome, leukemia, cancer, or other genetic disorders that, again, were previously not being seen in the Lyle population, which is further helping Lyle crack what is going wrong here, which winds up being, we get a very long explanation about it when he eventually winds up, we'll get there. So what it winds up being, and it involves a lot of talk about how DNA works and things like that, but I'm gonna try to really approximately tell you because I could read it from the book, but it's like a lot. It's this thing about how normally the DNA is like opened up like a zipper, you know, it's the classic way. Something goes in, I think the RNA, wow, I'm doing a great job. RNA like goes in, gets the instructions from the DNA closes behind it, and that RNA then is able to like give the instructions out to make new stuff. I think that I maybe was just quite inaccurate and I should have just looked. The main point being that normally DNA copies itself, but it has this sort of safeguard when it's copying itself that checks that things are all in order. But the thing that the lotion is based on, which are these plasmoids, and then specifically there's also a retrovirus that is part of the solution, and part specifically of the batch that went wrong was the introduction of this I'm now like feeling like if I'm saying the wrong word, I'll be very embarrassed. But I'm also aware of the fact that I don't want to stand here for so long and look. Okay, wait. Retrovirus, please tell me I'm saying the right word. Yes. Oh God. I'm not finding the word there. RNA. I know that I got the RNA right. Oh my God. I'm sorry that I'm taking a hot minute trying to do this instead of directly talking. I should have been more prepared. And if I try to look for the word retrovirus in here, I'm sure that I'm not going to find it. So, there is a thing in the DNA that is like a retrovirus, and as part of this version, it allows the DNA to be read backwards, is what the problem wound up being. When the DNA is normally read forwards, it is having a safeguard in place. When it is read backwards for this thing that was meant to be a protection for it, it instead means that it's able to supersede the DNA's safety. And what wound up happening with this lotion is that a random mutation in the RNA happened out of like millions, billions of, you know, these instances of lotion. One of them mutated, but it mutated in a way that based on how the DNA functions in this RNA and all that stuff, it then could spread to every single other part of lotion that it's connected to, because this one mutation is instantly able to apply itself to all of them because it supersedes the DNA safeguarding, because it has this retrovirus thing. Meaning that why nobody can replicate it is that there was one incredibly random, unlikely mutation that was in that one batch, and that one batch has the mutation, and it spread itself to all other versions it came in contact with. But every time you try to recreate it from scratch, it doesn't have that one mutation. It could, again, in theory, maybe wind up evolving that. The stuff that he's using is something known to be prone to mutation, but that's why no one can recreate it. There was just like one bad cell in all of it that infected everything else. And so it is in fact possible to make more. If he had some of the original blank, you just have to take a bit of that blank and mix it with any recreated lotion solution, and it would in fact spread. Which he realizes, but it's once more a thing of like, okay, so we could in fact make way more of this stuff. What good does that do to anybody? In fact, it's already done so much bad, because by the time he's recognizing how this works, he winds up going to one of the camps. They try to lure him out they run a fake execution of Susan, and he's aware that this is almost certainly a fake execution, but he also can't really help himself, and I don't know, he doesn't have much going on anyway. So he does in fact reveal himself as the real Lyle. The government takes him captive and they take him to the UN. And at the UN, there are only a couple like designated countries there representing. Very few people. One of the old people on staff from the cosmetics company is there. She's really like she is wielding a lot of power. She is the power player. Her name's Cynthia. And Cynthia is like this skeletal lawyer kind. I don't think she's a lawyer. I think she's marketing actually. Is there as an absolute powerhouse. There's a couple delegates from countries. Lyle winds up there. And there's also a secretary who is Cynthia's secretary, who is also there as this new character. And it's kind of this weird thing where he winds up held captive by the UN. They want to know what to do. That's basically it. They want to know why this happened, if he knows how to make more, and they're also trying to figure out what do we do, because things are just getting worse and worse. Everywhere is getting, like, absolutely... Like, most countries have shut down their borders entirely, but that's doing nothing to stop the spread of both Lyle's and also this lotion. There's a huge amount of paranoia on all sides about everything. Water is now being rationed. Food is also being rationed. Water, especially in the New York area, but in general, it's not really known how safe it is because they've identified that this stuff can last in water. And it's just sitting there like, okay, so we're at the end of the world, but what do we do? Like, there is a world-ending threat, but as world-ending threats go, this isn't a zombie situation. There's some rioters outside because they are rioting, they're unhappy, but that's not the biggest threat. There isn't a war on, there isn't nuclear threat yet. Like, there's all these things kind of hanging as issues, but as end of the worlds go, a lot of it is just sitting there like, what do we do? There's this thing that's out of control. Can we do anything? And so they spend quite a while just talking about ideas, and Lyle shoots a bunch of them down, as he always does. He's like, that's not feasible, that doesn't make sense, that's no good. And once more he's called out, like, you always just shoot down ideas, you don't really bring them anything forward, and you still just let stuff go forward. Like, he doesn't bring his own ideas, he is negative about everyone else's, and he still ultimately does stuff like let this lotion apocalypse happen in the first place. Lyle is really just unpleasant guy overall, but that's the thing, is that he's still him, and he is, as millions of other people are him, and the end of the world is happening, he really isn't able to change that much. He kind of feels like he starts to grow a bit of a backbone here in the UN room, but that's only because he has some expertise that they want to know about. And that's it. It's not really like he's earned great respect or shown himself to be anything more than a guy who can tell them about the science of what's going on, and that's it. As he concludes, this stuff is incredibly dangerous and kind of unstoppable. He certainly doesn't know what to do about it. He doesn't think that they are likely to be able to filter it out of water. They don't know how to filter it out of water because it's already run through water filtration and not been destroyed, so clearly they'd have to do something else. They don't know. And the book goes into a bit of, like, churning of wheels at this point. Like, this part till the next part at the end, I kind of do think it goes back and forth a lot. I really like hearing the ideas of what they should do, but yeah. There's also the matter of, like, the secretary to Cynthia. Her name is Lily. And Lily and Lyle kind of have, like, they develop a bit of a thing for each other. They seem like they have okay-ish, like, conversations. I don't know what I'm saying, really, on that front. But, like, I don't technically hate the concept of them in a relationship way where I feel like Lily is just sort of a love interest and nothing else. But I do think that, like, here at the end of the book, kind of throwing in this love interest and relationship isn't that necessary. And Lily's thing also is that she was one of the models that worked for the company, but she wasn't one of the models used for the lotion because she has celiac. And so that's something that they wouldn't be giving out there. And this is where that question about, like, disability comes in, is specifically that she's very against using the lotion. She never was tempted to. And people are kind of like, well, you have, you know, celiac. Wouldn't you want to get rid of that? And she's like, no, which feels very reasonable as things go. Like, I don't know, celiac obviously can be deadly, but also it's very livable with, and that's her opinion on it. So as a character to kind of represent that other viewpoint of what if I'm happy with my body that is seen as imperfect or needing to be changed, especially now that there's an easy way to change it, she's not really the character who's there to explore that idea in depth. Let's see. I'm trying to think here about what else is going on. But yeah, they're turning wheels. Oh, Susan. So Susan and her cohort, they decide that the next move they're going to do is they're going to take chimpanzee DNA and link that to lotion. And then they're going to turn everybody in Congress into a chimp. They don't really have like a big idea on why. Susan gives a speech about like, well, you know, we gotta do this, we're gonna show them, we're gonna take them, but like, again, take them down, show them what's wrong. None of that matters because honestly, the government is just as helpless as the people. It really is just the thing of they're angry and completely powerless, and this is just something they can do. But it is horrifying because again, they can bind the lotion with chimp DNA. And that means that animals can be affected by this. And they can. So what we start to see as we get closer and closer to the end is animals are not immune to this lotion. This lotion is full of stuff that can rapidly mutate, so maybe they weren't at first able to be affected, but they definitely can now. We get one of these chapters, and I wish that the end had more of these, where it's just the perspective of like a random person living their life in rural Ireland who starts hearing strange sounds from the barn. And it sounds like a human screaming, maybe. This is something like 9 days until the end of the world. And as they go to check it out, I'm going to read you the description of some good old scary body horror thing. The narrow light darted back and forth across the chaos, searching for the screamer, and when it passed across a human face, Alan cried aloud and staggered back. It shone in his mind like the after-image of a flash, bright white in the light beam, eyes wide with terror, mouth open and screaming, nose flat and thick and brutish. A snout. Brendan swore and crossed himself and brought the light back slowly, almost unwillingly, to shine again on the screaming face. It was human, yet not a human. It was a pig, yet not completely. Wide and misshapen, sitting up on haunches a pig would never have. Wires of black hair bristling up above a face both human and pig, and profoundly neither. One pig ear flopped on the left, while a curled human ear pressed against the other side, like a squashed pink cabbage. Its mouth held human teeth and porcine tusks. Its snout dribbled strings of mucus, blue eyes peering out in abject terror. It raised its foreleg, two jointed human fingers probing helplessly beside a deformed hoof. The pigs around it swirled in a frenzy, goaded to madness by the beast's endless, awful screaming. The screaming of a human throat inside a monster's body. I love this level. I was having the thought earlier in the book, I remember just being like, is this gonna spread to everything? And it is. And that is one of the most terrifying things that I can think of in terms of, okay, this is in the water supply. The water supply, as it takes them way too long to realize, is linked to, you know, the water cycle. It's in the rain, it's in the air, it's everything. And there's a lot of Lyle in there, but like, everything is gonna get mixed in there, especially the more that this keeps going and the more that any blank stuff gets out there, and even just blank being washed down the drain. Who knows what it's gonna bind with, but it will find something to bind with and then aggressively try to encode everything. That's also where some of these genetic mutations came from. I'm realizing I missed out on that. So part of that is that if somebody isn't taking time for their DNA to fully reset, and if it's in the water and everything, you're never going to have time for your DNA to fully reset, then you wind up with the lotion, multiple lotions that have multiple aggressive instructions to rewrite your DNA, warring with each other, trying to rewrite the same thing at the same time, or constantly changing. And that is why people are winding up suddenly gaining genetic disorders or cancers at an increasingly rapid pace, because everybody's body is turning into a warfare zone for competing DNA. So as the UN really doesn't come to any kind of conclusion, the rioters break on through and they attempt to escape. They rush to the roof where they're hoping Washington, D.C. is going to send a helicopter to pick them up, but nothing ever comes. And as they continue to wait there, this is where Susan's group comes up and attacks them, spraying out this chimpanzee DNA everywhere onto a bunch of people. There's a lot of chaos going on. Lyle, Lily, Cynthia, and like a couple other people manage to escape through all of the chaos. They go through like underground city streets and make their way to Cynthia's like private yacht, where they then sail. So they go out to sea. While they're out at sea, they are still figuring out what to do. New York is like burning at this point. There's no signal on the radio from anywhere. They're increasingly sure that just there is like nothing to do. They're considering it and they don't know. Lyle thinks of a place to go, which is it's a CDC center. It's like an animal disease research center that's on Plum Island, because this is a facility that would be absolutely airtight, absolutely secure about any kind of infection reaching them, and they have their own cycled water supply that is not reliant on outside sources. So this is actually kind of the perfect place to spend an apocalypse like this. They head there and they're able to talk to the team about what's going on and kind of force their way in a little bit, though the island team is still very wary about letting anybody in. But this seems like a good place. As they are sitting there thinking about it and talking about it, they're also kind of going, wait, so are we going to wait here? How long are we going to wait here? Is this a restarting the human race kind of situation? I think that it's really clear that we can't do that. That at this point, the world is so absolutely fucked. This is not an apocalypse that you can just form a little silo, reproduce, wait generations, and come out and be fine. I think that there is simply no way that's possible. But people don't have any other solutions beyond just wait to die. So they talk about that kind of thing. The Animal Research Center has a little bit of blank stuff. They were sent it by the government way ages ago. And this vial of the blank immediately becomes a focus of like power, because one other issue is we're functionally immortal if we've been dosed by that. So should we be using it on all of us? Are we making a new society that's going to be based around this immortality or not? Or what should we be doing? And they're just sitting down debating all of this stuff. The use of the lotion as like this new item that Cynthia controls and that other people covet. Lyle kind of is just realizing that this is going to descend into just chaos and fighting, and he wants no part of it. And he talks to Lily and kind of decides, like, I want to leave and I want to ask Lily to come with me. And, okay, so this is like the very end of the book. Before I get to what happens, I want to talk about, let me see here, the Lily and the celiac stuff, because they have a conversation about why she never wanted to take the lotion, and I really don't like this conversation, and I want to share it with you. Let me see. Yeah, because he asks her, what does your illness mean to you? And she's just like, it means I can't eat pizza. Like, she's just joking. And he's like, I'm being serious. You have a genetic disease that's warped your health, your diet, your social life, your entire existence into a daily struggle just to get by. Rebirth could have solved that problem in a heartbeat. A few $1,000s, 4 months of nutritional supplements, and you never have to worry about your health again. And, you know, he's like, you could do all these things and you could live a normal life, yet you never did it. She answers, I like being me. But Lyle continues, I don't doubt that. I imagine everyone likes you, but nobody works that hard to accommodate a curable disease unless the disease itself is an integral part of who they are, or at least who they think they are, who they want to be. I don't think you like yourself in spite of celiac sprue. I think you like yourself because of it. Lily continues, so I'll get to her viewpoint on it. Because again, Lyle's not really a likable character, so when I think about things that he usually says and thinks, I don't think that I'm meant to agree with or find him insightful all the time, because he definitely is intentionally written to be not a great guy. But the tone of this conversation, where it's between Lyle and Lily, and they have like an established thing for each other, I think that we are meant to take this conversation more seriously and more thoughtfully. And as someone with chronic health issues, I really find myself very frustrated with all of the rhetoric that is going on here about the idea that, you know, if you have something that is just simply curable, first of all, it's not curable for her. It's not just simply you have a curable disease. It's a disease that won't kill her, generally speaking, and it's a disease that is only curable if she changes all of her DNA. And the idea that that is just like, fair point. So she ends up responding like, she starts talking about like, oh, that's a bit deep. I think the thing is that like, I'm not gorgeous. I'm a professional model, so I know the difference between pretty and gorgeous, and I'm pretty. And I'd say that I'm really pretty, but if I'm hanging out with supermodels, I can't help but feel self-conscious, especially because I'm usually like the black girl that they brought in to round out demographics. So for a while, my first few months in the industry, celiac was my excuse. I can't be as pretty as her, I can't have her body, I can't follow her exercise program because I'm sick. It made me different, and being different made me feel better. But it doesn't take long for I feel better than you to turn into I feel better than you are. Celiac turned into my consolation prize, my snide little triumph that maybe you never ate bread, but I'd never ate bread or else I'd die. Maybe you had a strict diet, but I had an even stricter diet of my life hanging dramatically on the balance. Maybe you were prettier than me and featured a little more prominently in group poses and got more shots overall, but I was a martyr an inch away from the hospital. It made me feel better about my insecurities, like I had something nobody else had. I think that, oh, and Lyle follows this up with, I don't believe you, and then spouts his theory, which I hate, but the thing is, I can't like say this is at all invalid, because I do think that there is something there that can definitely be true. I don't like that this is our only representation of somebody with a disability who is a main character talking about the disability and talking about why they wouldn't change it. That the only example we have about what is a very interesting topic and a complicated topic is framed around what a lot of people would call, like, you know, playing the victim, that her whole character is, and this is our only representation of somebody with a disability, is that she enjoyed the attention and it made her feel morally superior to be disabled, and that's why she is attached to her body and her disability. I really don't like that. But I also do think that there still is something to be said about, but in a more complicated way, disability and a level of that feeling of like, I'm suffering, and using that as a way to comfort yourself about other people and about other people who are able to do more than you, but you can remind yourself, like, again, I have disability, like chronic health things, and I definitely do see and understand some of what she's saying in terms of that feeling that when you feel like absolute shit and you're dying and all those sorts of things, that you still can at least get a little bit of like that piteous kick of, but these other people who are doing more than me, feeling better than me, having this life that I'm not able to have, they don't understand what I have, and I am the one who is suffering, and maybe if I wasn't, I could do that, but that's not possible. Like, okay. But Lyle has the gall to say, I don't believe you when she says her quite long opinion about her disability. And what he says, okay. Nobody that self-aware is shallow, which conversely makes me the most shallow person in the world. Maybe literally at this point, he laughed dryly, which, okay, you can't say nobody that self-aware is that shallow, just stop. But then, okay. Earlier tonight, when Cynthia suggested you could get a new body, you almost punched her, which I kind of wish you had, actually. That fierce protectiveness, that zeal to defend your disability, celiac's not just something you lord over other models. I think celiac makes you who you are because it threatened to make you something else and you didn't let it. You're not a victim. You're not a patient, you're not a dropout or a charity case, or anything like it. You're a happy, healthy, successful woman. Not because life made you that way, but because you personally overcame everything life put in your way to stop you. You love it because it's the mountain you climbed to become great, and now that you're standing at the top, you can see farther and be greater than you ever could before. And that is the end of this conversation on disability, and that is like the worst. Like, I already have quibbled with what Lyle said, what Lily responded, and now I really want to fight what Lyle's saying here, because his response is the reason that you're okay with your disability, and again, with your body, like, he's saying, like, oh, you know, Cynthia suggested you would change your whole body to fix your disability, and you nearly punched her. Do you think any of that could be about the other things in the body and the selfhood of your own form, body, recognizing yourself in the mirror, things like family attachments, like I'm faceblind, so I don't know how this works, but a lot of people say things like, you know, having their mother's eyes, finding that a comfort. It's none of these things. He's just like, I think you did it because you love being disabled, because your disability made you not a victim, not a charity case. Which, of course, what are we saying about the people who are or feel like in any way victims or having to live on charity? No, she is the successful, healthy, happy businesswoman. That is not something that everybody can be guaranteed. And to say that the reason that she is okay with her disability and likes herself in any way is because she fought so hard to not be just some sort of sad victim. I find that so insulting and frustrating, and just people can have their own opinions on how their disability makes them feel, and that can vary so many ways, and that can include things like being happy with how much you're able to do or how you've been able to. I don't like the term overcome, because overcome suggests that it's stopped. It hasn't stopped. It's something that she can live with, and that is the case with, like, disability. Like, you can live with it and be proud of yourself for the ways that you're able to live your life and adjust to it. And that could feel like overcoming, but I don't like that word. But I hate the way that Lyle is triumphantly phrasing this as like, this is actually why, you know, you're happy. And you know what Lily says after this, which is why, again, I don't think I meant to just read this as Lyle being a shithead, is Lily says, that might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. So right after this, Lily and Lyle, like, start making out, and then Lyle's like, wait, I don't want to hook up with you because I don't want this to just be an apocalypse, we're dying, let's hook up thing. So he backs off, she goes to her room. But after, he's sitting there looking at, she was drinking a water bottle, and he's like, I could get some of the lotion, and I could dose her with her own DNA, and then we could escape together. He wants to escape together with her anyway, but he's realizing that he'll live forever and she'll die, and he doesn't want that. So he goes to Cynthia, and after some confrontation is able to get some of the lotion and is able to indeed just dose it into her water bottle. And then he flees. He grabs her, he doesn't explain what's going on, he grabs this water bottle where he basically like runs it around the rim, squeezes it out, I think maybe, and then, or probably not, and then like shakes the water around it. It only takes like one molecule for it to spread after all. And so he grabs that water ball, he grabs Lily, they make a run for it, and in the chaos, they steal the yacht they came on, and they start to sail away. He passes her the water bottle. He's like, I didn't have time to grab supplies, I just have some water. And she drinks that, and he's like, okay, great. Immortality forever, which is a super, super fucked up thing to do. I think that is kind of showing us again that Lyle, even though he's sort of won over the girl, and you kind of could think, oh, and he thinks he's grown more of a backbone, he thinks he's changed, but actually he is a coward and a bad person because he doesn't ask her. He is actually, I think she is against it when the subject comes up, even against her own self being the one that's regenerating, and he doesn't care. And one thing that I am sad about is that this doesn't get revealed to her, because this is basically the last chapter of the book. They sail for a while. Everywhere they go, they see fires or people kind of on the shore. They try to avoid it. At one point, they stop off at Florida, but a creature on the shore scared them off. Tall and simian, with tusks and human breasts and arms that hung well past its knees. They tried again in Abacos, but a group of 20 identical women watched them with silent, somber eyes, and they steered away again. Just little snippets like that, that's what I want to see more of. So they just sail off, and we never get a confrontation of Lily realizing what's happened. But the reason we don't get that is that there is an epilogue, and the epilogue seals their fate. I love this epilogue. This is so much what I want. So the epilogue is day, dawn, the island, 10 days since the waking of the people. And this is the perspective of Ket. And Ket is there with his sister Chert, and he's one of the people. And it is a very odd thing. His sister Chert had begun to make the spears on the 8th day of the world, and now on the 10th nearly everyone had it. They made it easy to catch the insects and mice the people lived on, far easier than catching them with teeth and claws. New things like this were happening almost every day, and Ket had to wonder if the world was offering them new ideas, or if their own capacity to have ideas was expanding. The people were becoming smarter by the day, growing larger, and there were other changes as well. He looked at his paw. He did not remember having these fingers in this shape when he awoke 10 days ago. The mice and other rodents did not have them, only the people. He wondered, and not for the first time, if the people had once been like the mice, or if their transition into something else was still happening. They notice a large white thing coming closer, and they realize that there are creatures atop of it, giant creatures. And they begin to discuss. They have arms like us, said Tissit, arms and legs and hands. It almost sounds like they're laughing, said Chert. Are they people? They're too big to be people, said Tissit. They're almost as tall as trees, and they have no hair on their bodies, only a tuft on the top of their heads, like leaves. I do not think they are trees, said Chert. Look at what they carry, said Ket, and the people grew quiet. The creatures in the water were pulling objects out of the white things now, miraculous things none of the people had ever seen before, and Ket could not help but compare them to the spears in his hands. We built this, he thought. Did they build that and that? Their objects made a massive pile in the sand. Who are these creatures that build such great things? I think they are gods, said Ket. Chert's eyes looked at him. What are gods? Gods are people, Ket said, only bigger and smarter. They have everything the people have, but they have more of it. Their size is greater and their deeds are greater. He looked at the gods' hands, saw their fingers in the same shape as his own. We should approach them. We should ask them for their gifts. Perhaps with their gifts we could become like them. He paused. Perhaps that is why they're here. And they continue to observe them. We will give them our gifts as well, said Chert, and the people picked up their spears and broadleaf platters of meat, both mouse and insect. The gods were touching each other in what Ket was convinced was a kiss, and they didn't see the people until they were only a few short hops away. The gods screamed and moved back. They babbled and their voices were loud, but Ket couldn't understand them. They can't speak, said Tizit. They can't be smarter than us if they don't even speak. Maybe their language is greater, said Ket, like their objects are greater. But he had his doubts. As confusing as the words were, the feeling seemed clear. He could hear it in their voices and see it in their eyes. They were afraid. A god should not be afraid, said Shirt. The larger god was clutching a giant spear, but a strange one. Instead of tapering to a sharp point, it flattened into a broad, flat leaf. Ket wondered what type of creatures the gods must hunt to need a spear so powerful. Then one of them gets close, and the god smashes the spear onto Zit, who becomes a bloody mess. These are not gods, said Ket, shocked at the attack. They are not great. He looked at the people behind him, saw fear in their eyes, the rage. Animals have died before, and insects, but never the people. They have not brought us gifts, but death. He turned back to the gods. They are afraid. They have great things, but they are not great. We would be better gods than these. He looked at the people and roared in righteous anger. We will take their gifts, we will eat their meat, and we will become new gods. The creatures screamed, and the people charged. And that's how the book ends. I read a lot of that chapter, but it's because that's exactly like what I want to see, which is the bigger question of what will Earth become after this is so interesting to me. So, like, I don't know what these guys are. I actually don't know. They were some sort of small creature. Mice or rats or something, I think. And the way that also their evolution seems to be rapidly, not just into human-like forms, but human-like and human-like intelligence, but a very interesting thing of, is building a spear like an ingrained thing? Is there something that they are learning from, like, humans develop language and tools and things, but not in the span of 10 days. So it makes me wonder if there is even more to this DNA rewriting. If in the intelligence they're gaining is some, like, epigenetics of humanity in there that is causing them to recognize and evolve these traits at a much rapid and behaviors at a pace that is so different. And that what will the future of Earth be? I guess there might be creatures that would evolve some sort of immunity to this DNA thing, but also it's phrased as if it's impossible. So maybe it's just instead like this fluidity of species. I don't know, but I find it so interesting. And yeah, that's the end of the book. So I've talked a lot about it already. It's just a book that I enjoy. I think that it's really fun. I think another comparison point, I brought up Black Mirror, I'd say like a Doctor Who, like a Star Trek, like one of those things where it's just a one-off episode of something that is just taking an idea and exploring it a lot. And because it's a book, it gets to explore it even more. I think that there are some issues with characters and pacing and prose and some of the writing, but what it does deliver on is what I wanted from it. And what I wanted from it was just to explore these ideas, and I had a really good time doing it. I genuinely, I just really like this book. And it's a kind of a unique situation of liking a book where I can list a lot of stuff I don't like, but that aspect of it that works for me, it just works so right.